So again, good evening and welcome everyone. This is the City of Montebello Community Meeting. It's the Montebello Moves Bus Line Improvement Service Plan. And we appreciate you spending some time with us this evening. So thank you again for joining us. Next slide, please, Julie. So I just want to go through some instructions for how we would encourage you to participate tonight. Just to let you know that we do have the option for interpretation. So there is that feature on the bottom of your screen, and you can click on there and select which language you would like to hear. We have Spanish available along with our English presentation for tonight. And just going to go ahead and repeat the same information in Spanish. Buenas noches. Gracias por estar con nosotros hoy. Esta es la reunión comunitaria de la ciudad de Montebello para hablar sobre los autobuses y un plan para mejorar el servicio. Gracias por estar aquí. Para avisarle que sí hay interpretación esta noche. Puede usarlo por medio del Zoom. Haga clic en el idioma que le gustaría escuchar y tenemos el español disponible para hoy. Okay, Julie, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So just some reminders. I'm sure most of us are used to Zoom by now, but just a reminder, you can click your little raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen. And to lower your hand, you can click that same button again. If you are joining us this evening via phone, please press *9 on the phone to raise your hand. We will have some interactive discussion later on in the presentation. And then you can press *6 to unmute. I will call out the last 4 numbers of your mobile numbers so that you will know that we are identifying you to go ahead and unmute and ask your question. We do have this evening the Q&A feature enabled. So you will again see that at the bottom of your screen. So if you're doing this virtually, you can pop in your question there anytime during the presentation, and then we'll have some time later on in the meeting to go ahead and go through your comments and address those. Next slide. So with that, we will do some team introductions. My name is Melissa Holguin. I'm with Arellano Associates. I'm the outreach manager on the consultant team. And I wanted to hand it over to Adriana Kendricks to go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adriana Kendricks, acting director here at MBL. I've been with MBL for a year as I play dual roles. I'm operations manager and right now acting director. So I'm excited about this project. As demographics change here in LA County, I'm excited to be a part of this process with you all. And I'll hand it over to John.
Thank you, Adriana. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Soria. I'm a transit administration manager with the City of Montebello, Montebello Bus Lines. And community engagement is so crucial to the success of the enhancements that we're looking to introduce through this project. So we're just excited to have you joining us this afternoon or this evening to learn more about our project here at Montebello Moves. Thank you so much.
Hi, good evening. My name is James Gomez. I'm a consultant with Nelson Nygaard. We are a transportation planning firm that are leading the Montebello Moves study, and I am the project manager, and I'm excited to work with the community and collaborate with the City of Montebello.
Great, thank you. And we have Julie Nieto with us tonight too on my outreach team. So with that, James, we'll go ahead and hand it back to you so you can take us through the presentation.
All right, well, first of all, thank you all for joining us this evening. We have several slides to share with you all that review the project as well as some of our key initial findings, but we want to spend the bulk of our time this evening hearing from you. We'll get started by providing an overview of the project, which kicked off back in July of this year. The Montebello Moves study is a comprehensive evaluation of the entire bus system. We're looking at things such as the existing routes and schedules, ridership patterns, both historical as well as recent. We're also looking at the communities and the destinations that Montebello Bus Lines currently serves and that they could potentially serve in the future. The project consists of 3 primary phases, the first of which we're wrapping up currently, and that is a review of the service and market within the service area. So that entails looking at all different aspects of bus service, as well as the population, demographics, socioeconomic characteristics, as well as the employment within the area that's currently served by MBL. The second phase of the project is a service development segment in which we're going to take feedback from this initial round of community outreach, and based on all of the information that we gather from the public, we're going to start introducing some ideas or concepts. We're going to take those back out to the community early next year. After we obtain some feedback on those ideas, we'll then start to develop recommendations and ultimately a strategic plan to both enhance as well as grow the Montebello Bus Lines system. Some of the key project goals that we have include obtaining community feedback and understanding what the needs are of not only existing riders, but also potential riders as well. So we want to understand what are some of the difficulties and challenges that you face with transportation, and how can transit become a solution for the communities. We want to make transit more convenient and useful. So that involves looking at some of the best practices within the region, as well as throughout the country, to try and implement or incorporate some of those different transit best practices to try and make the service more viable and more attractive. We want to try and not only retain existing riders, but also attract new riders. So looking at ways that we can grow or regrow ridership for the system is very important. We also want to look at different inequities that may be in place today and see how we can resolve those. So we're looking at trying to provide better ways to serve the community at large, and also develop recommendations that'll be sustainable over time to ensure that the system can not only grow, but can also remain strong into the future. Ultimately, we want to develop a multi-year service plan that'll look at ways to enhance the current service, but also incrementally expand and reach a broader audience and serve more individuals. For those of you who are not quite as familiar with the different destinations served by Montebello Bus Lines, we wanted to provide a map that shows some of the key shopping, employment, as well as major educational institutions that are served or that are within a short distance from Montebello Bus Lines. The dark blue lines on the map indicate where the current lines operate. So these are on primary streets, not only within the city of Montebello, but within some of the neighboring jurisdictions as well. And we'll get to some of a list of those later on during our presentation. Now, the destinations that are shown on the map are both, they're a combination of different places that people would like to go to. And some of those we're going to look at ways that we can serve more frequently as well. The next map shows a closer picture of the existing lines operated by MBL. And each one of these lines is numbered based on a multiple of 10. And they are shown in different colors on the map. The dashed line in the center of the map indicates the city limits, or the boundary for the city of Montebello. So the current route network extends well beyond current city limits and serves many other adjacent or neighboring cities. In total, there are 7 different local bus lines. So these are routes that make regular stops, and they travel the length of these different corridors and stop pretty frequently, every 3 to 4 blocks or so, and run throughout the day. Most of these local bus lines, or typical bus lines, run 7 days a week, but some only operate on weekdays and Saturdays, and others only operate on weekdays. There's also one express line that's operated by the city of Montebello that runs from the city into downtown LA during the morning weekday peak periods, and then in the weekday afternoons, it travels back eastbound to the city. Overall, there are approximately 800 bus stops across the entire system, and many of those lie outside of the city limits. The next chart shows all of the existing lines, route lines 10 through 90. And on the left-hand column, we have them broken down by weekday, Saturday, and Sunday service. The schedules for those different service levels vary a bit. On weekdays, most routes operate a little bit more frequently, as frequent as every 15 minutes throughout the day for line 10. Line 40 operates every 15 minutes during peak periods only, and then it drops off during the midday period. Other lines operated by MBL are not quite as frequent. They run either every 20, 30, 40, some even run hourly. On Saturdays, not all of the lines are in operation. Lines 60, 70, and 90 do not run. And then on Sunday, line 50 also does not run. Another slight difference between weekday and weekend schedule is that weekend routes or lines operate just a bit later into the night and a little bit earlier in the morning. Next, we want to show how Montebello Bus Lines interacts with many of the other regional transit providers. It's shown in the magenta colors, Montebello Bus Lines, and all the other colors represent different systems. Some of these are large systems such as LA Metro, Foothill Transit, but others are relatively small municipal providers that operate a little bit differently than the larger systems. The municipal providers or city systems tend to only operate within their city limits, and they also run on streets that are not quite the major corridors. They're more so neighborhood streets, and they're focused on connecting people from those neighborhoods to some of the major corridors, say a LA Metro or Montebello Bus Lines route. There are 10 different systems that MBL connects with, and many of these don't operate quite as frequently. So it's important to look at how those connections, how those schedules interact, and opportunities to enhance those connections where you have a lot of people transferring between systems. Next, we'd like to talk briefly about ridership and how that's evolving. Last spring, every transit system in the country saw a sharp decline in ridership during the months of March and April due to the onset of COVID and some of the service reductions or suspensions during that late spring, early summer timeframe. During the midsummer, MBL, just like many other systems, started restoring service and also saw an increase in ridership. Typically, the highest ridership month of the year is October, and that's because there are no holidays, school is in session, and weather is generally always good. We did see a spike in October 2019, and October 2020 we were seeing an uptick in ridership, and since January of this year, we're also seeing a slight increase. We're looking forward to reviewing the October 2021 ridership after this month and seeing just how much the system has grown. But the good news is that we are overall seeing a positive trend in ridership. In addition to looking at ridership at the system level, it's also very important as part of the study to look at it by route. Earlier, we had a chart that showed how lines 10 and 40 operate much more frequently and also 7 days a week. There are also very long corridors. That combination of being long lines with also frequent convenient service means that they carry many more riders than some of the other shorter, less frequent, less convenient lines. On weekdays is when we see the highest ridership. I should note that the chart on the screen shows ridership conditions really when things were beginning to peak back in October of 2019 prior to COVID. Overall, weekdays were better than Saturdays for every route. But as you can see, there's a major difference between those two strongest lines, 10 and 40, and then some of the other lines that MBL operates. Taking a look at ridership by route after COVID, on the next screen, actually right here, yes. we can see that overall the ridership fell pretty significantly for all routes, in particularly on weekdays. So Saturday and Sunday was what we've been seeing recently since COVID, that it did not drop nearly as much as weekday ridership. And we believe that's due to some of the changing and work patterns on weekdays, the ability for more people to work from home, and also just demonstrates the very high need for weekend service. And all illustrates the need to potentially enhance weekend service and run later and more frequently. The next slide shows just how much things have changed from pre-COVID conditions to about roughly a year ago. So weekday ridership fell about 62% on weekdays, and then on weekends, we saw a decrease of just over 40%. As we showed earlier, overall things are increasing, and we are seeing overall that trend between weekday, Saturday, and Sunday, there's not as much of a drop off as there was prior to COVID. So we've shown ridership both at the system level as well as by line, but we also want to look at ridership by bus stop. So the map on this screen shows the relative ridership, or where there's the highest activity, the highest number of people getting on board the bus throughout the entire system. So where you have darker colors means that there are more people getting on and off on those stops within those corridors. The lighter colors are where we're having fewer people get on and off the buses. The highest ridership corridors in the system belong to lines 10 and 40. So that's the Whittier Boulevard and Beverly Boulevard. And those are very commercial mixed use corridors. They have a combination of both origins and destinations. People live within walking distance, but they're also traveling there for work, school, medical, recreation, just a number of different trip types. As far as origins go, there's a couple of neighborhoods that stand out that have a really high level of ridership relative to some of the others. And those include South Montebello, as well as Monterey Park, specifically around the intersection of Garfield and Garvey, and then Rosemead within the San Gabriel and Garvey area. There are also many hotspots, if you will, on this map shown that aren't some of those high ridership neighborhoods. In fact, they're more of a destination. And some of those major destinations include East LA College, the Shops of Montebello, which is in the northeastern corner of the city. The city again is represented by the dashed line right within the heart of the map. And then we also have downtown LA, which is served both not only just during peak hours, but throughout the day. Uptown Whittier, as well as Whittown Town Center over on the eastern edge of the system. On the topic of bus stops, I mentioned earlier that there's about 800 total stops within the entire system, and less than a quarter of those are within the city of Montebello. The city of Montebello only maintains the amenities as well as just the upkeep of the stops within their city. The other neighboring cities also have anywhere from 2 to 12% of the bus stops, and they're responsible for maintaining the stops and installing the different amenities within their city limits. Comparing where the stops are at versus the ridership, there's a higher percentage of ridership or share of the ridership than the share of stops within both the city of Montebello and then unincorporated LA County, which includes East LA. So some of the key findings, which are included on the previous slide you just went over, are that lines 10 and 40 are very productive, very successful routes operated by Montebello Bus Lines. They account for approximately 70% of the system's total ridership, and that has not changed either since COVID. Montebello Bus Lines has a very large footprint. While some of the other municipal providers are just focused on their city, MBL goes well beyond their jurisdiction to serve 10 different municipalities, including unincorporated LA County. And that is in large part due to just how long the system has been around, where some of the municipal or city providers have not been in operation for quite as long. The system ridership decreased overall about 60% from October 2019, or pre-COVID, to a year ago, but we're seeing an increase since then. Staff monitors ridership every month, so we're very excited to see what October 2021 looks like. And although lines 10 and 40 are very successful, very frequent, many of the other lines don't offer quite as convenient service. Their ridership is much lower, not just because they're shorter, but because they don't run as often. So they're just not as convenient or viable option as lines 10 and 40 go. So clearly when the frequency goes up, ridership does as well. There are also opportunities to make some changes or adjustments to some of the existing lines. In some cases, there may be opportunities to shorten or streamline or straighten out some of the routes to make it easier or reduce the travel time for existing riders. But there's also some opportunities to potentially extend some of the lines out to hit some of the key destinations that are just outside of walking distance, or that might today require a transfer to another bus line to a different provider. So those are things that we're going to be looking at very closely as part of this study. And we're also interested in hearing what the community has to say. So in addition to examining the systems, ridership trends, and just the makeup of its different route network, it's also very crucial, as John mentioned earlier during the presentation, to hear from the community.
Thank you, James. And so we have been out, as James mentioned, trying to really receive as much input as possible. It's really important to hear from you, from the riders, potential riders, really how this system could be improved and the destinations that you would like to see in the future. And we've been, the team has had staff out on the buses, on the bus lines, riding and sharing the survey. And we've received about over 700 surveys to date. We were able to also participate in the city's 101st anniversary in mid-October, and we'll be looking for additional opportunities to be able to participate at pop-up events in the future. And as you see on the page here, we also have the website that has been live. And the website is a really good resource. There's a quick little background on the project. The destinations graphics map that was shared earlier in the presentation is on there as well. The community meeting that we're hosting now is on there, as well as the survey. And the recording of this meeting will be made available for anyone that was not able to join us tonight. They will have the option to be able to view that after at their own convenience, to be able to get that information as well. And the survey will continue to be on there through the end of the month. I'm sorry, through the beginning of November. November 5th is right now our target date to receive that information. So again, if you could please share that with as many as you can, anyone that you think would be interested in providing their input on the survey. And with that, next slide, please, Julie. With that, we would like to now make this an interactive session with you. We have just 2 questions that we wanted to put out as a Zoom interactive poll. So you'll see that pop up on your screen for your input. So if we can go on to the next question. So this is the first question. Which service improvement is the most important to you? So we realize that there may be multiple needs or input that you would want to give. And so these are the options we have on the screen: more frequent midday service, or would you prefer later service, or more lines running on the weekends, or would service to new destinations and connections be a priority? And again, these are, I understand, are all important, but what we're trying to do and what's most helpful for the team is to try to understand which would be a priority, so that, obviously there's a certain amount of resources that are available. So if we had to allocate resources to certain priorities, that's what we're trying to understand. The more specific the input, that's what helps as we were developing this plan. So you should now have seen that come up on your screen, and I'll give you a minute to go ahead and input your responses. Once everybody's had a chance to submit their response, we'll see the results live on the screen. Okay, thank you. So it looks like out of these 4 choices, the top priority came to be service to new destinations and connections. And this is interesting because I think it is in sync with what we heard. We have been holding some small group stakeholder briefings as well with some of the local communities, stakeholders and others that have expressed some of these same interests about just destinations and connections. So James, would you add anything else on this category?
Actually, I would just like to add that we are looking at extending service as part of the study to a couple of different destinations, major educational institutions. Cal State LA is one, Rio Hondo is another one that we're looking at. And I'm just curious if anyone would like to share what are some of those new destinations or connections that you're interested in via the chat.
Yeah, I mean, that you can raise your virtual hand if you wanted to just, have a interactive conversation, or you can put your input into the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen as well. And it looks like we do have a hand raised here, James. So Samir, please go ahead and unmute and you can ask your question.
Oh, is it to ask a question? My bad. Well, I was going to provide a comment.
For the question, for the poll, but yes, if you have a comment, please go ahead.
Well, okay. I live up in I don't really remember the exact neighborhood I live in. It's right by Sure High School. It's on the top of this hill, right? And if I want to go on the 40, the only way to do that is I have to go down the giant hill to Beverly and 19th for the stop on the 40. And I don't really know if this is logistically possible, but I really am dying to know if there's ever going to be any stops in that neighborhood near Sure High School, to service that area, because I have a job starting soon in downtown, and I would really love the opportunity to take the 40 more often, right? But I have to walk all the way down the hill to Beverly 19th, which is the closest stop, or I have to trek back up the hill. And it takes an inordinate amount of energy and time, to be honest. And yeah, I guess that's my comment.
James, did you want to address that?
Yeah, this is great feedback, and this is exactly the type of feedback that we're hoping to hear. There is a current Route 90 express route that doesn't have a stop near where you live, but in addition to just looking at the ridership patterns, we're also looking at the commute patterns within the area too. So we're picking out several different key employment centers, such as downtown, and trying to identify where people are coming from. So that'll help us understand if there are opportunities for other stop locations for express routes or other lines to try and make those connections. So thinking about the linkages between origins and major destinations. So thank you very much for your comment.
Great, thank you. I think we can go on to the next question. Okay, so here's poll question number 2. You should be able to see that on your screen, but I will read it out loud. Which strategy do you most strongly support? So there's 3 options. Would you prefer that the service area be expanded? And that would probably result in some less frequent lines. So we talked a little bit about, certain amount of resources, really kind of thinking through the trade-offs of what we want to prioritize if you had to. And this is the kind of input that helps the team as they're developing the improved service plan. So expand with less frequent lines, or the other option would be to reduce the area that is served, reduce the service area, and then focus on increasing the frequency on some lines. That would be the second option. Or number 3, maintaining the system as it is today. So if you want to run the poll, Julie, perfect, thank you. So this poll is up on your screen, and we'll give everyone a minute to kind of think through that and provide your responses. This is an interesting question too that we have to ask, right? Because we understand, again, there's a lot of important priorities, but we want to make sure to be responsive, but then at the same time, just understanding that there are different options in the way the service plan will be developed, but that also means that at the end of the day, that there are some trade-offs, some exchanges that we have to be mindful of, obviously with the city resources and what is able to be done and not be done. So this is very helpful when we respond to this information. And then when we're ready, if everyone's provided their input, we can go ahead and close that one out and see what our results are. Okay, looks like we have a 50-50 split here with our group. So both reduce the service area with some more frequent lines and maintain the service. So James, did you want to comment on any of these?
Yeah, I'll first start by just mentioning that this is a tough question. You know, ideally we would both expand service and make it more frequent, and really not touch existing lines. But there will probably be some sort of combination of both, looking at new opportunities as the lines really haven't changed in a very long time, but also looking at where we can make the system more efficient or make better use of the limited resources that are available. So in regards to the selections of reducing the service area and providing more frequency, if you would like to mention which particular line you would like to see more service on, that would be helpful. And if there are any other general feedback, we'd love to hear that.
So anyone from the audience, if you responded to that one, anything else you would like to add, more specific? And again, you can raise your virtual hand, and we could definitely love to hear from you. Okay, if you think of anything, we'll still be here on comes to mind. You can also pop it into the Q&A. Great. So that was our 2 poll questions. So thank you for that input, very helpful. And now we just kind of want to open up a little bit more general comments and input. Our first question is, what is Montebello Bus Lines doing well? So you could, again, put it in the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you verbally if you wanted to raise your virtual hand. We want to talk about what's working well so that we can be mindful of that with any of the service improvements. No input, okay. How about just what are the improvements? I know Samir shared earlier already his specific route, and just looking at something around Share High School. Anything else to add on that? Anyone else with any thoughts of what types of improvements you would like to see. You're a shy group today. Okay, I don't see any questions or any hands raised. So, so again, this is an open conversation. The reason that's why we're here tonight. We want to really hear from you guys, really understand from your perspective, or maybe not just yours, but others that you know, or other things that you've seen as you are a writer. If there's anything that you would like to share, you know, I know that in some of our earlier group briefings, we did hear people sharing just maybe not their own perspective from their families, what they experience in trying to use the bus, or maybe you were a previous writer and maybe you're not today. If you have anything to share on that, that would be great too. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I think, James, did you have anything you wanted to add or mention before we move on to the last few slides?
No, I think we can move on, Melissa.
Okay. All right, so then next slide, please. So then we will, we have just 2 more slides to finish off the session. So just as James had shared earlier, our schedule, we are currently in phase 1. We are doing that community outreach. We're definitely looking for input on the survey, and wanted to let you know that we'll be back out during phase 2 in this spring, sometime early next year. And we'll be presenting the draft recommendations so that we can again receive input from the community. And then we'll wrap it up when we have the final strategic plan to share. And then just again mentioning that this meeting was recorded and it will be made available. We understand it's really hard during a weeknight. You know, people are busy with their families and taking care of the kids or working late or whatever it may be. We understand that, and we will make this recording available. So if there's anyone out there that you think that needs to be informed about this project, please pass that on. Please reach out to us if there's any other questions that come up after the meeting, but they will be posted on there. The survey, as we mentioned, is live until November 5th. So we're hoping to really get a lot of input from that survey. And with that, let's see. With that, we will, I just want to thank you again for being here with us tonight. And I would like to hand it over to John to go ahead and give us a few closing comments.
Thank you so much, Melissa and James. We really appreciate your team effort this evening. And again, thank you everyone so much for joining us this evening. Montebello Moves is an exciting time. It's an exciting program for the city, for Montebello Bus Lines. So we definitely encourage your input and encourage you to really get involved with this particular project, because this really is a great opportunity to provide some enhancements and some adjustments to our system just to improve the rider's experience as it relates to Montebello Bus Lines. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again to the team this evening for the great work of coming together and putting this all together. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Good night, everyone.